By phone, I have Nathan Foster from Terminal Ballistics Studies. How are you, Nathan?
Good, thank you. Good, thanks, Stephen.
Now, Nathan, first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and how this website came about.
Well, I started out like many New Zealanders. Back in the day, we all hunted with Lee Enfields. Well, most of us did, when that was about all that was available. And a lot of those rifles were good, but there were a lot of quite inaccurate rifles about. And as was normal then, I moved on to other bits and pieces of rifles that were floating around. And these rifles were often, of poor condition. And eventually I settled on a 6.5 by 55 Swedish Mauser, which is a lovely cartridge. And the rifles, the Swedish Mausers were lovely, but all the hype behind this was that the rifle was so powerful it could apparently, you could take down elephants with it, you could do this and that and the other with it. And when I shot my first deer with it, the bullet, which was supposedly able to do this, that and the other, it just blew to pieces and the animal ran off. And I sort of felt that it was cruel, and I'd had enough of this. We'd made so many mistakes over the years with the rifles, and I guess I was a bit OCD about things. I really wanted to find out what made a good rifle, what made a good cartridge, and get to the bottom of things. So from that moment on, I began serious research and into both the rifles, accurizing the rifles, and also studying cartridges. So we really went out en masse. I went to high velocity, powerful cartridges, slow, heavy cartridges, and eventually got to a stage where I thought, well, we've started helping people locally in our district with setting up their rifle. So they'd bring a rifle and they'd want it fixed. And so I'd do that and I'd set up a load for them and so forth. But then I found that the hunters themselves often needed education with shot placement, because that was also lacking. It's not just one thing to have a rifle that can do the job, but you got to have the hunter right. So I would sit down with they were now clients, not locals, I suppose, and go over these things with them. And then eventually, with all of these things happening, I decided, we need to put this into book form. So I started this book. Well, what a mission. It was going to be called something like Hunting Cartridges of the World, or something like this. Anyway, it grew and it grew and it grew, and we would do stints in engineering and so forth, my wife and I, and we'd pour all of our funds into purchasing test rifles and test ammunition and hand loading components. And so that kept us extremely poor for an extremely long time. And it got to the stage where this book was such an animal that I just couldn't get it to a stage where I was ready to have it published. And also, I wasn't a very good writer. So I'd spent 2 years writing my first draft of it, and I got to the end of it, and my writing style at the end was different to the writing style at the beginning. So I rewrote it again, and another year later, the writing style at the end was different to the writing style at the beginning. And then at that stage, I was foundering, really, and an internet company came along. One of the men was a hunting client, and Zeal stepped in, and they said, "Well, we know you have a small website to do with the work that you do, but how about to get this stuff out, we actually just put it onto web pages, and then it's done, it's out there, and then you can use that for perhaps marketing other services. We'll just see where it goes." But the general advice was that as it is, it's just dead in the water. It's just going nowhere. I'm going around in circles, which is so true. So that's what we did. We set up this knowledge base, and when we started that, I really sort of thought, what the heck are we doing? We were looking at using advertising on our website, and we thought that this was going to pay the way and so forth, which it didn't work out that way. And it got to a point where I had to we'd already spent so much money on research that we sort of felt that, we wanted to get something back from it, but we got to a point where, we're so far into it now, we just got to focus on giving and helping. And that became the ethos, really, was to just help. And then one day, if this works, it'll work, but if it doesn't, well, that's just too bad. So we kept doing this, and then eventually we did get a book series going, and that was the current book series that we've got out now, which is there's 3 so far, and two about to come out. So those focus on choosing a rifle. The second book is focused on choosing cartridges, but that's specifically to the long-range cartridge scene, which is very, very popular at the moment. And then the third book was for home users. It's called the Practical Guide to Bolt-Action Rifle Accurizing and Maintenance. So it teaches people how to accurize their rifles and maintain them. The fourth book is due out this Christmas, and that's on hand loading. And the fifth and final book will be on shooting technique, which is quite ironic, really, because I think that should have been the first book. But anyway. So, and also in 2009, I created a epoxy resin specifically for accurizing rifles for bedding. And for those who don't know anything about bedding, it's very, very important that a rifle, if you could think of a rifle as a tuning fork, and the barrel as perhaps, rather than the bullet leaving the barrel in a linear fashion, if you could think of it like a baseball pitcher throwing a ball, the barrel whips each time you pull the trigger. And if that rifle doesn't return, if that metalwork within the rifle doesn't return to the same point within the stock each time you fire the rifle, it's not going to be accurate. So to get that perfect fit between the metalwork of the action and the stock, we bed the rifles. And I was using different compounds over the years to fix or to bed client rifles, but eventually we developed this compound for our own use, and then put that on the market. So that was another little coup. Yeah, great little thing. But so yes, lots of things happening in backcountry New Zealand.
Isn't it interesting? And this digresses a little bit, but isn't it the way of the world now that you need to come up with a product, put it out there to market, and then figure out how to monetize it later on? That seems to be the last step, isn't it?
I think so. Things have definitely changed. And it's an information world, and there's free information out there. And you've just got to, I think we've got to change the way we look at how we share information. And you've just got to be prepared to give. But I mean, that was our thing. I think the more you give, the more you get back anyway. But just being able to help, that's good. And if people see value in what you do and you genuinely want to help, I don't think it matters whether you're into the internet or whatever you do. People will respond as long as you're genuinely honest with them and you really do want to help. But yes, it's changed. That's for real.
Now, I had a good look around your website, and congratulations, it's great. And the first thing that it did for me, and I don't think I'd be unusual in this, is it started to make me think about calibers outside of the 270, 308, 7mm08. Because that's what you do. You go into a store and those are your three go-to centerfires.
Yes, nothing wrong with them either. They're lovely cartridges.
Yeah, but do you think people are, by going here, they're going to have a look at those other ones, or are they just going to look, like, for example, I shoot with a Remington 7mm08, and I've just finished reading a great article that you have on your website about that. Do you think that's going to now, I'm going to go away with better knowledge and hone in the skills I have with the rifle that I already own, or do you think that's going to cause me to go, oh, actually, I'm going to go and try this caliber, and I'm going to try this brand?
Oh, we see a bit of both, really. People will use an article, this is a good example, 7mm08, and they will extract the maximum performance they can out of that cartridge. But at the same time, people, they just get in there and they want to have fun. So it's like, do I go for a blonde or a brunette? So there's room for experimentation. And I think one of the important things that we try and promote is to give people the skills where they're doing their own testing, where they're not reliant on me as the so-called expert, Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because the other thing is you talk about bedding in your rifle, and I think a lot of Kiwis don't take all of that for granted. They use the same, 303 or 308 that they've had behind the door for the last 30 years. And always they get enough, they're deer accurate, they say, that's about all they really go for. And I've always found that interesting because I don't think you get that clean kill. And I was really interested to hear that was your motivation, or the start of your motivation. Do you think those old boys that have been doing this a long time could benefit from going to your website and maybe purchasing some of your books?
Well, a lot of them do, but I think one thing you have to be really aware of is a lot of the times you'll get the braggers tell you, I could do this with this rifle and I've done that. And it tends to sometimes create a situation where guys who aren't getting the results that they think they should they keep quiet because they're thinking, well, such and such said, oh, you could do this with that, and and I'm not getting that result, so it must be something wrong with me. So they sort of, they get a bit worried about things and won't say anything, and it just creates a bad situation all around. And it's a bit like the horsey world as well, and it just puts unnecessary pressure on people. So there are a lot of people from all disciplines who use our products, and there's a gunsmithing institute in the USA. It's long distance learning. The books are now compulsory course material for their students. So, it's getting to a point where people are realizing that this kind of stuff is important. And also, there was a time, a long time ago, when these skills were quite prevalent. And what I've found is that they've just been dying away. As we get into this sort of more towards this throw-out society, the good gunsmithing skills are gone, the good accurizing skills are gone, even the shooting technique has gone downhill. And you would think that with all the gear we have and with all the, all the high tech we have, people would be just so far ahead with what they can do with a rifle now compared to what could be done in past years. But it's not really so. The rifles are capable of doing wonderful things. We've got great engineering, but the people driving the rifles, the skills are just going downhill, and that's worldwide. And the same goes for the gunsmithing. So that's something I'm trying to turn around, and it's working slowly. It's taken a long time. You've got to build up your credibility, and you've got to get to a point where people take you seriously, and you need people to go away and test these things for themselves.
If I was going to say, look, treat someone like me who's been a hunter for a number of years, spent plenty of time on the range, and think that I've been given some good advice. But to be fair, I'm in that same boat. You actually described me really well. Sometimes the gun that I'm using isn't doing what the guy next to me is getting out of it. Have you got some tips for someone like me?
Oh my goodness, I can't teach you new tricks. You're too old now.
Oh, no? I'm only in my mid-30s, sunshine. But have you got a couple of things that you could say to me that may begin me down this journey or start me on this journey?
Okay, so you said your rifle was 7mm08, you said? And
Remington, 700 action. Yep.
700 action, and is it a plastic stock SPS, is it?
Yes.
Okay, so that rifle could do immediately with what we call stabilizing the forend, which is filling the forend up with our stabilizer compound to stop it from flexing.
Yeah.
And then bedding, that would be the first step. And then from there, should be able to achieve basic results with factory ammo, providing the bore and everything else is sound. So those are the things we'd normally go over, and you can do those things yourself by checking through in the books. And then as far as shooting technique goes, well, that's something I would want to be there with you, beside you, seeing what you're doing. But I think what's happening is, I just noticed it the other day actually. There's a lot of poor technique on the benches and on the shooting ranges, and sometimes a strong guy can muscle in a rifle and shoot with quite poor technique, and he'll get away with a lot, whereas a smaller guy won't get away with it. So we need to bring back these traditional techniques where guys are actually holding the rifles properly. They're not shooting freehand, which is the freehand is this crossed arm technique, which is so prevalent now. And that's great for F-class and shooting heavy rifles with low recoil. But as far as hunters go, hunters are picking up this technique, and it's actually driving the sport backwards. It's making people, if you're holding onto the forend, just checking how you're positioned behind the rifle. So there's two aspects there. There's the rifle, and then there's the shooter. And we haven't even got to the ammo yet. But
yeah, I suspect the shooter needs a bit of work, to be honest, as well as as well as the rifle. And one thing that I was looking at, and I don't, is that I actually learnt to shoot on a 22 range as a kid, and I don't think I've changed my technique when I've gone up to large centerfire. Okay. And do you think that would be an issue for me?
Well, I don't know what your technique is like, but when I was taught military style. My family background was military, and so those things were taught with, no matter what you were using. But I think today that's just not happening. So, if you've got a good traditional hold, it doesn't matter what you're using. 22 is great for training, especially for offhand shooting as well. But yeah, I'd have to see you right in front of me to see what you were doing.
I think we need to arrange this. I feel
Yeah.
like we need to spend some time. Now, off air, we talked a little bit about how you choose the right caliber for what you're doing. And I think that's something that a lot of listeners would like to hear. Can we go into a little bit? If I'm about to go into the hunting and fishing store or into the gun store and choose my centerfire. I may already have a 308 or I'm looking at changing calibers. How do I go about choosing the right caliber for what I'm doing?
Well, I tend to break it down by well, first of all, you've got to take it to a local level. So you look at what size game you intend to hunt locally, and I have a rule of thumb which I use in the books, and that is you need to look at what 90% of your game hunting is going to be. It doesn't have to be 100%, but you look at what you're mostly doing. And then from that, you can choose a cartridge which is applicable to most of that. So as a general rule, if you're hunting game under 90 kg, I tend to opt for the 7 mils if that's 90% of your hunting. If 90% of your hunting is game over 90 kg, then we go from 30 caliber upwards. So in other words, we're looking at sort of 243 to 7 mil for the lighter animals, and then from 30 caliber upwards up to about 400 kg. So if we're talking pounds, we're looking at 200 pound through to 880 pound for the 30 calibers. And then if you're predominantly hunting larger game, if you're a Canadian hunter, for example, or someone up in the top end of Australia, you might want to look at a 338 as your all-round cartridge, or one of the larger bores, and use that as an all-rounder. And you can use that on light game. I don't see why that's a problem. So it's a matter of choose. So that gives you your bullet diameter and your bullet weights. And then as far as the powder capacity goes and how much power that cartridge is going to generate, well, that comes down to what kind of ranges you intend to hunt to. If you live in an area where you've got heavy bush or short forestry blocks, where you're walking up and down fire trails, whatever, then you can, choose a cartridge with relatively mild recoil and a low powder charge. But if you wanted to reach right out, well, then you need to start putting some powder behind it. So range comes into it. Bore diameter comes into it as far as the game animal size. And then we've also got to take into account what the shooter can handle as far as recoil goes, if the rifle's to be shot without a muzzle brake or a suppressor. So there's a lot of factors to balance out, and that's why I think it's not too easy to give that sort of information away during an interview, and hence why you can see the need for a knowledge base online. We've just got thousands and thousands of hours of research and a book series to go with it. So, and it just goes on and on.
Yeah, and you made a really good point there. One is the powder side of things. I think guys just go with and I see this a lot, where they go in, they buy the same ammunition they were given when they bought the gun. They were given a free box of whatever, and that's the same thing they buy forever, and they don't really shift it around too much.
All right, well, let's take a really good example of that would be the 243 Winchester. In New Zealand, that gained a great reputation during Philip Holden's era when he was a colour. It's a lovely cartridge if you know how to use it. It's very, very popular in the UK. It's a great cartridge for roe, fallow, that sort of thing. Puts meat on the table all the time. So very, very useful cartridge. Now, if we take the locally available ammunition, we've got a bit of a range here to choose from, but the one that people will commonly go for example, is Highland. Now, the Highland ammunition, I mean, it's inexpensive and it's okay up close. And in some cartridges, some chamberings, it's really good, and the brass is quite useful too. But in this instance, the 100 grain 243 ammunition is going about 2,600 feet per second, which is very, very slow. Within a very short distance, it's got less power than a 30-30, and it just tapers off and becomes much, much worse from there. So just because you've got the right the chambering to which you think is going to do the job doesn't mean the ammunition is going to do the job for you. I mean, a cartridge like that, once it gets past about 200 yards and you hit an animal behind the shoulder, you don't hit it squarely, that animal's not going to go down. There's a good chance the animal's going to run off and you're not going to retrieve it. If you shoot any further, if someone said, well, 243 is a good flat shooting cartridge, you could hit a deer out at 300 yards with that. So you take that ammunition, you shoot an animal at 300 yards, and that wind blows that bullet back further and it hits the very rear of the lungs or just misses the lungs, and there's no bullet expansion, and that doesn't send out a disproportionate to caliber wound channel, which will actually reach out and destroy the lungs, even though you've shot too far back. That animal's going to take 4 hours to die, unless it's been struck through the liver or something like that. So there's a level of cruelty if we're not careful in how we choose our ammunition, and this sort of runs into this long range debate. People say, I don't shoot long range because it's unethical, but when you think about it, this guy's out there who's using ordinary rifles and ordinary ammunition, taking shots at sort of 250 to 300 yards with rifles that really, or cartridges that aren't up to the task, and rifles that just really aren't up to the task either. So in some instances, 250 yards is a long shot. And if you compare that to a really, really accurate rifle, which has got a good ammunition within it, a good shooter, 600 yards is on the money shot, whereas with the other guy, you can't guarantee that he's going to really do the business, or in some cases even 100 yards. So you've got to sort of take all these things into account.
Very, very good points. What about, you talked earlier about choosing the right gun for your size. Now, I look at Mrs. Spargo, who's very, very, very small girl, and
Yes.
even my 7mm08 with a suppressor on it knocks her around too much. She's just a little over 40 kilos, so she's a tiny thing. So for her, it's always been, I'm not going to do any long range shooting, or deer stalking's never really appealed for that reason, and it's always been a bit of a disappointment to her, I think. Can you?
Okay.
How do you do that? What's the answer?
Okay. Well, with a lady like that, I think shortening the stock up would make a difference. You could possibly find that the scope on the rifle has too short eye relief, and it feels like it's coming back at her face, and that's giving her a fright. And it's got nothing to do with felt recoil whatsoever. Actually, when it comes down to it, when women start hunting, when they decide they're going to do it, they want to do it properly.
Yeah.
If a woman could handle a really big cartridge, she would, because she wants that job done. She doesn't want to see the animal suffering. So knowing that, that you can actually place a lady in a position where she'll do her best with what she's given. But we sort of handicap each other, because a lot of the rifles are set up with scopes with very, very poor eye relief these days. And it just feels like that scope's coming right back at you, and it's going to knock you right in the eyebrow. So that's a start. Cutting the stock, the butt stock down to a length that would fit her is important. And along with that, what else? Shooting technique's a big one. If you can get that person into a comfortable position and show them how to properly hold that rifle, that will cut the recoil down exponentially. So we're not even talking about changing cartridges. And I'm sure I could actually have your partner up and running without a suppressor.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm enjoying this. I'm going to... I think we do have to catch up and go through this. Yeah, you've made some interesting points.
So now, further to that, if you wanted to, if you were a hand loader, you could start downloading. Now, I was talking about Highland ammunition being in this one chambering, being very slow. This is what you do with surplus 50 BMG powder when you don't know what to do it. Stick it in 243 ammunition and sell it to Westerners. But with the 7mm08, for example, you could choose a very, very soft, frangible bullet, so that if you do have to load it back to suit her, she can still reach out with that and deliver a good blow to game. So not only can we change the rifle around, change the technique around, there's also ways we can use hand loads to make that rifle softer recoiling, but also just do a brilliant job when it hits game. So there's a range of options there, and all those things are covered in the books.
Yeah.
And on the website, things that can be learnt there. Yeah.
Nathan, you've been hunting a very long time. In that time, you must have built up at least one decent hunting yarn for us.
Oh, shivers. Yeah. Gosh, I don't know where to start. I can tell you good stories and bad stories, and yes, I could tell you a story about the old 6.5 by 55. Again, this is the old expecting it to drop elephants, a wild cattle beast came in on me at about 25 yards. He was above me on a terrace, and I had my basic soft point 140 grain bullets going at about 2,750 feet per second. He was moving around quite a bit. It was very, very aggressive, and I went for the headshot, but the bullet just, it hit the skull at the wrong angle, and it just scraped up. Anyway, it was a 5-shot magazine. I got to number 5, sorry, and he dropped down, and he was still coming in at me. So I was shooting pretty fast, but even though it was 25 yards, it was very, very rough terrain. So the way he could only get to me by coming through quite difficult trees, it was very, very horrible, steep terrain. And as he came in, I fired my last shot, and it dropped him. But then he got up again. As he got up, he came for me. By now, he was about 2 meters away, and he got his hoof stuck on a branch of a tree as he came through, and it was a fork down low in the tree. So just as he came at me, I pulled my knife out. I sort of jumped to the side, took him through the neck, and raked right down and got him open and killed him on the spot. And then he did a big death throw and did a giant somersault and went past me and flipped down the terrace. So yeah, that was pretty much a fun story. Highlights the importance of the right bullet, but more so the right cartridge.
Nathan, if people want to find your website, where do they go?
Our website address is www.ballisticstudies.com. Another way is to just simply Google Nathan Foster and ballistics. Yep. And other than that, they can find us just by looking for cartridge information. We usually crop up on the internet one way or another.
And like normal, if you scroll down on the information section on this podcast, I'll have a link to your Facebook page and your website on there for you, Nathan. You've been a great interview. Thank you so much for your time, and I know there's precious little of it. No worries, Stephen. That's great. Cool. Well, guys, that's me for another week. I'm about to go hunting. Yes. First time I've been out for a little while, mainly because I sit in the studio making the show rather than getting out there and doing it. Thank you very much. Good hunting.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location, from a secret hunting spot known only to him, and the guy who told him about it, and possibly the guy who told the guy who told him. It's a show all about hunting in New Zealand and around the globe. This is The Hunting Show. Find The Hunting Show on Facebook and